Good evening. Let me change the screen over. All right. Technical difficulties right out of the gate. Bear with me 1 second. Oh, I know why. Because I have the brand thing on. That's why. There we go. You would think after about 5 or 6 times with StreamYard, I would have this thing down pat now. Evidently not. Chuck is not the sharpest tool in the shed sometimes. Welcome to After Hours Live Chat with your host, Chuck Bowser, RCDD, Bixie Technician. Lots of experience here. So remember, After Hours, first thing we always start off with is our drinks. So tonight, Chuck is drinking Earl Grey tea with a dash of MCT oil and some kind of sweetener that's not sugar. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. I've been battling a cold all week long, which has been really tough because I taught 3 classes this week, and I've been under the weather all 3 classes and just not feeling good. But here I am, sticking it out. One more. This is the last one I'm doing this week, and then Friday I'm doing regular stuff. So, cheers. So tonight's subject is one that's very near and dear to my heart. Tonight's subject is about safety and, more importantly, ladder safety. So let me flip this over. And again, Chuck is trying to struggle with with everything here all at once. So which got to go back to the beginning. I don't know how I got down to there. So tonight we're talking about ladders, stepping up your performance and your safety. You know, ladders. Oops, went too far. So what's really the big deal with ladders? Ladders are probably one of the most abused and taken for granted tools that we have access to. And when it's used correctly, it will certainly make your job easier. It will certainly allow you to get things done that you wouldn't be able to get done otherwise. If you use it incorrectly, though, it could hurt you. It could do some serious damage. Let me adjust my screen there just a second. There we go. It can also hurt you. One of my future son-in-law, I guess you would call him, we went to a football game for our grandsons last weekend or the weekend before, and I noticed his ankle was all swollen. And I asked him, what's the deal? And he's told me he fell off a ladder. You know, again, people take it for granted. They think ladders are easy to use and they're no big deal. So why the issue? Again, you got to choose the right ladder for the right job, and you got to know how to use it safely. And tonight we're covering those very subjects. Those very subjects, like I said, are very near and dear to my heart. So here's our agenda for tonight. First, we're going to talk about ladder types. Now, there's a lot of people think, well, there's only just a couple ladders. And no, there's a lot of different types of ladders and a lot of different types of construction that ladders are made out of. So we're going to cover how to select that ladder, how to determine the weight load and reach capacity, and how to use that ladder safety. That's going to be the second one. We're going to discuss safety tips. But you can't cover safety tips without first going over the accidents that happen with ladders. Because again, like I said, everybody thinks that it's safe until something happens to them. And the reason that this subject is very near and dear to my heart is my uncle, who I loved very much, died as a result of a scaffolding accident. Now, he wasn't on the scaffolding. He worked in the warehouse. He was the warehouse manager, and scaffolding fell over and crushed him and killed him. So safety's always been, and if you remember from the last episode of After Hours Live Chat, remember I told you one of my qualifications to be able to teach stuff like this is I spent 5 years in the fire department. All right, I got instructed on how to use things and how life safety and medical and stuff like that. And you couple that with my 40 years of construction experience, because communications is really construction, being on lots of job sites, having to attend lots of weekly safety tailgates, using ladders, seeing accidents happen with ladders. I think that at least lets me have this discussion so we can talk about the things that can potentially happen. And then at the end, we're going to open up for a Q&A section, right? So that you can actually ask questions from me. This thing is also being multi-streamed from LinkedIn Live to my YouTube, and it's also being recorded. So that way, if you don't happen to be able to watch it tonight, or you're watching it tonight and you think, hey, John can really use the information in this 30-minute video, by all means, share it with them. This also will be posted on my webpage, 5minutercdd.com. Just look under the live stream tab and you'll find it there. So ladders seem to come in many different types, and it's almost as many different types as the jobs that we're asked to perform. But like other tools, you want to have the right tool for the right job. You wouldn't go get a Phillips head screwdriver to drill a hole in a concrete slab. Well, you could, but you're going to be there a long time. The right tool for the right job. So when talking about ladders, there's three very important things that you need to ask yourself if you're considering buying a ladder or using a ladder, getting one out of the warehouse. There's three very important things. First, you need to ask yourself, what type of ladder do I need? Now, you probably think, well, I need an extension ladder. I need a step ladder. Well, it's a little bit more involved than that. There's other considerations, and we're covering those. And then also, what height are you going to be working at? Are you working inside of an office building where the ceilings are 7 feet? Are you working, doing some satellite work, putting satellite dishes on a roof of a house or a business where you need an extension ladder? What height are you going to be working at? And then finally, the third question we're going to cover is the weight capacity that you need. Now, you're probably thinking, that's easy, Chuck. I weigh 225 pounds. That's this. No. There's other considerations. And as I said, a lot of people just kind of take this for granted, and they don't really think about that. So ladders come in. Let's talk about the types, the materials that they make ladders. Out of. I'm sorry, I had a hiccup there. So you can get them made out of wood. You can get them made out of aluminum or metal, and also fiberglass. Each one has its advantages and disadvantages. Let's look at each one of those. So wood, the advantage there is they're non-conductive. So if you're working in an environment where there's live wires or there's electricians around, wooden ladders are great for that. But the problem, and they're also very durable. They're also very heavy. Now, the disadvantages to wooden ladders is an advantage of a wooden ladder is they're generally, not always, but generally cheaper than fiberglass ladders or aluminum ladders. Now, the disadvantage to a wooden ladder is, like I just mentioned, they can be heavy, very heavy. And that basically is going to mean you might have to get somebody to help you to move that ladder around. And as they age, as you climb up them and climb down them, you'll see, for example, you look at the picture here on the PowerPoint, you'll see that the steps have bolts going into the side. Well, from the ladder you're climbing, ascending and descending the ladder, and it's shifting side to side and stuff, those joints come loose, and it could become an extreme hazard. Now, I just said it's very good because it's non-conductive. Well, that was only partially true. A wooden ladder, if it's wet, is very conductive. Now, you probably think, well, how does a wooden ladder get wet? When technicians love to strap their ladders on top of their vehicles. And when they drive, around to the job site and go home at night, well, if it rains that night and you come in, the ladder is going to be because it's wet wood, and it's going to be conductive. So it might not be the best type of material ladder that you're using for that particular job site. The next one is going to be aluminum ladders. The advantage there is they're light. One person can easily handle a ladder, an aluminum ladder. Now, the disadvantage is they can't be very conductive. So you got to watch out for that kind of stuff. And if they get any kind of moisture or wetness on them, or maybe a little bit of oil, you're walking around on a job site and you stepped in some oil where the fire suppression guys were putting in sprinkler pipe because they used a metal lathe and some oil got on the ground and you stepped in that. A metal ladder can be extremely slippery. And then there's the fiberglass. And this is probably seems to be the most commonly chosen amongst communication workers. Now, this video is not just for communications workers. Anybody works on a ladder, but since I am in the communications industry, my focus is going to be tend a little bit more closer to the communications industry. So it seems like most technicians love the fiberglass step ladders and the fiberglass extension ladders. They're light and they're non-conductive, but they generally are very, very expensive. I priced a 6-foot ladder, fiberglass ladder the other day, and it was about $145, where a wooden one of the same height and weight capacity was about $95. So again, there's your differences between those. So that's the first thing you got to do is you got to decide what material do I want my ladder made out of. There are some other considerations too. You have to figure out, okay, am I working on even surfaces or uneven surfaces? Now, for communications, you're generally going to be working on even surfaces. You're working inside of an office building. Or you might be, again, if you're working outside of the building, putting on satellite dishes or putting up antennas or doing outside plant cable run that you're attaching to the side of the building, the ground might not be level. A lot of people don't know this. They make extension ladders with the feet that you can adjust the different heights for unlevel ground. So that's going to be the best ladder for that. But again, generally, most of the time, communication workers don't usually have that type of ladder available to them. Another sip of my Earl Grey tea. Then you need to ask yourself, am I going to be using this in a crowded work area? And the reason you got to ask yourself that question is because if it's a crowded work area, well, then an A-frame ladder may not be the best choice there because A-frame ladders have a very wide footprint. Right? So you might want to go with a smaller step ladder or some kind of variant like that. And then you have to also ask yourself, what obstructions are going to be in your path as you climb? If you're just pulling cable in a commercial office building, well, generally there's not going to be anything really in your path unless you're working in an existing office. Then you might have to set up between desks or furniture, modular furniture, stuff like that. So you don't necessarily want a wide ladder for that purpose. Then you need to ask yourself, okay, what is my working height? How high do I need to go? Now, this is a big thing that most installers and most technicians get wrong. They think, okay, well, I'm working in a commercial office building. A 6-foot ladder will be more than enough. Well, a 6-foot ladder only gives you standing height of about 3 feet 9 inches because we'll talk about safety in a minute. You're not supposed to stand on those top 2 ladders. So a 6-foot ladder may not necessarily be the right height ladder for that job. Now, this chart is actually from the American Ladder Institute. Actually, I can't remember. It's either from the American Ladder Institute or the LouisvilleLadder.com. I got it from one or two of those. I can't remember which off the top of my head. It's a great resource. They also have another table exactly like this for extension ladders. So that way you can determine that as well. So that's your working height. But now you got to think about, okay, what's my maximum reach? So based on someone who's 5'7" and they have a 12-inch vertical reach, that's how far that you can see on the table. For that 6-foot ladder, you can reach 10 inches, right? Or 10 feet, 4 inches. Keep in mind that you want to be within safety parameters, which we will talk about here shortly. Then you have to consider weight capacity. Again, most people think, well, Chuck, I only weigh 225 pounds, so a type 2 medium duty, I'm looking at my little chart there, is going to do me fine. Again, no, there's a lot of things you have to consider. Obviously, your weight is going to be one of them. Then you have to figure out, okay, how much is the weight of your clothes? Because you're going to be heavier in the wintertime if you're working up north when you're wearing your heavy clothes to stay warm. What kind of PPE do you have? Is that adding weight? Hard hats and safety harnesses and stuff like that. What is the weight of the tools that you're going to have to be carrying up the ladder? Right? You might have to be carrying a hammer drill up. You might have to be carrying up something else. When I used to work, I used to have a side job when I was a young technician trying to make ends meet. My brother-in-law had a roofing company. So we would throw an extension ladder up against the side of the house. And because I didn't know much about roofing at the time, I was the laborer. So basically I got to throw that 80-pound bag of asphalt shingles on my shoulder and climb up the ladder. Well, luckily at the time I was only about $1.80. So 180 pounds plus the 80-pound bag of asphalt shingles, that meant that was 260 pounds. So a type 3 light duty ladder would not have worked there. So you got to consider that. And then another consideration that you have is what kind of tools and supplies that will be stored on your ladder. So you might have something hanging off your ladder while you're doing the work, and then you got to go down and get some more, maybe it's like some paint or something, and you have to go down and get more paint. Well, that's even more weight. So you got to think about all these considerations when you're trying to determine what is the right weight capacity. Now, here's where the rub is. The heavier the duty the ladder, the heavier the ladder. So you probably think, well, Chuck, I'll just go with the one that's got the capacity of 375 pounds. That way I know I'm good for everything. Until you have to carry that ladder around all the time. I remember when I was a young technician working for a cable TV type company. It wasn't necessarily cable TV. And I was always having to put up extension ladders to get on the roof of row houses and stuff like that to work on the antennas. And we ran by ourselves. We didn't run in teams. And I literally, on more than one occasion, had to carry a 40-foot extension ladder over my head to be able to get there, because you had to have 40 feet to be able to get on the top of the row houses. Well, if it was rated for 375, I probably wouldn't have been able to carry that. So those are other considerations. So not necessarily the best ladder is not necessarily always the right answer. So let's talk about some of the most commonly used ladders in the communications industry. They're going to be extension ladders and step ladders. So the extension ladder, it's basically two ladders that are connected together. They have these little rails, and you can extend them the working height to go up. And you generally will lean it against a building. We'll talk about the quarter rule and how to determine the right angle which you got to lean that at. And then you have step ladders, which basically open up, and then they have arms inside that lock down. Now, actually, the step ladder you see here is actually considered a combination ladder, because if you look at it, you can actually lean that, use that as a single piece extension ladder. So there are specific ladders that are outside of the world. There's also articulating ladders. You see a picture one here on the screen over there, one that kind of goes up and down, up and down. So they can articulate to get you in some places where other ones won't. And then you have collapsible ladders. I have one of those out in my shop. We bought it when we had our school bus. We bought a school bus to convert into an RV, and I had to do work on the roof on that, and my regular ladder wasn't tall enough. So we bought one of those collapsible ladders to get on top of it. And when it's folded down, it's literally 4 feet tall, but it extends out to about 18 feet. So there's many, many different kinds of ladders. Which one you pick, again, is really going to be dependent on which one is best for you. So now let's cover some safety. First, again, we got to lay that foundation. We got to talk about what happens. Why are we talking about safety today? And it's kind of funny because I posted this after hours live chat probably the day after I did my last one. I'm doing this every Wednesday. It's every Thursday at 6 p.m. And over the next week, I swear there was like 4 or 5 LinkedIn posts of ladder safety issues. There was one where they throw up an extension ladder on the side of the building, and there was 4 guys standing there, and the first one starts climbing up the ladder, and when he gets up high enough, the second one starts climbing behind him, then the third one starts climbing behind him. Well, lo and behold, that ladder collapsed. And then literally the next day or the day after that, there was another one where somebody had taken a skid lift with a pallet on it, lifted that up, and had a ladder on that leaning against the building. Okay, again, we're going to talk about safety here in a minute. So the reason we have to talk about safety is because people make mistakes. Accidents are unplanned events, and accidents can cause you problems. So we're going to cover some tips that hopefully will impact your behavior, that hopefully will make you think about things. I mentioned this in the class I taught today. Safety should be step 0, not step 1, not safety third, like Mike Rowe likes to say. It should be step 0. And what I mean by that is safety needs to be so ingrained, so in part of your personality, so part of your behavior that you don't even think about it. I'll give you an example because I love talking in parables. Breathing. It's kind of critical that you breathe, isn't it? Think about breathing. No, it's an involuntary action. It happens. Same thing with safety. It should be so ingrained within you that you're safe in everything that you do. So let's talk about some ladder accidents. And I got this information off of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration website. I looked up. They don't necessarily have statistics for accidents. They call it elevated positions. So over 90,000 people visit the emergency room every year from injuries from ladders. Now, of course, it didn't specifically say falling from the ladder because it could be other things that can happen as well. Ladders can fall on top of you. You can have things fall off the top of the ladder on you. 90,000 people. That's, I don't know, do the math. That's 365 days out of the year. So that's 270 ladder accidents a day, roughly, give or take, just off the top of my head. Over 700 people a year die from elevated falls. Basically, 2 people a day die because of a ladder accident or a scaffolding accident. And here's the one that really, really scares me. Over the last 10 years, ladder accidents have increased by 50%. Increased by 50%. You would think with all the safety conscious environments and training that we got going on that those numbers should be going down. No. And the reason it's not is because we as a industry, we as not necessarily the communications industry, but whatever industry you're in, the carpentry industry, the roofing industry, because like I said, I've worked in lots of different parts of construction industry. We are not good at training our young people. We just say, here's the task, you go do it. We let them sink or swim. But you really need to invest time, not only in the mentoring them how to do the job, but how to do the job safely. And then the last one I want to cover is 50% of ladder accidents involved somebody carrying something as they climb. And there's a very simple way to avoid that. And we're going to talk about that here very shortly, right? So first one is you want to make sure you choose the correct type of ladder. Are you working in an area where there's going to be electricity, right? So do you need a conductive ladder or non-conductive ladder? Well, if you're painting like for example, my brother's house, he lives in Maryland, and in his backyard, there's this huge wall that separates his backyard from a 3 or 4 lane highway on the other side of that wall. So if he was to paint that wall, it doesn't matter if his ladder is conductive or non-conductive, right? If you're working on the roof of a house and you're nowhere near the power side, it doesn't really matter. But if you are working near where the power line comes in, you better consider if it's conductive or not, right? Then you need to consider the height. We went through that chart earlier, and we're also going to go through some considerations when we talk about how to do work, like how you determine how high you need that. So never stack a ladder on top of something else. And I'll be the first to admit, I did this wrong. And just recently, and I knew better. I had a drone that I got for Christmas one year, and I flew it the first time. It's funny. I read somewhere that most drones are crashed within the first 30 minutes of their flights. And it was true for me. So I got my drone, and how far up can this thing go? And I took both one, and boom, and that drone just went up in the air. Well, as soon as I got above the tree line, got exposed to the wind, it started drifting. Well, I tried to get it back, and it wouldn't come back. And it got stuck in the top of a tree. Now, I live in a 3-acre homestead and don't have a whole bunch of access. So I got my Suburban out. And I parked it next to the tree, and I got an extension ladder out, and I put it on top of my Suburban to climb the tree, because the very first branch that was available, the tree was way up there. So sure enough, I climbed up, couldn't get it down. And then when I started coming down, a little safety bug started talking to me. It's like, Chuck, you're not being safe. Thank God my wife wasn't outside, because she would have corrected me, and rightfully so. And as I'm coming down the ladder, as soon as my foot hit the ladder went ching, boom. Now here I am, 12 feet above my Suburban, dangling, trying to figure out how I'm going to get down without injuring myself. So please learn from my mistake, right? And I consider myself a very safety conscious person, and I sometimes, I lapse judgment. Never set the ladder up in a blind location. Never set it up around the corner where somebody might walk around the corner and walk right into the ladder. You can injure them from walking into the ladder, and they can knock you over. If you're setting up a ladder in front of a door where the door is closed, make sure that you block the other side of that door. You put an apprentice or a technician over there, or you don't set up in front of that door, because if somebody opens that door, again, it can knock you off. And then you're also going to want to secure your work area, even when you're not on the ladder, right? A lot of times, especially working in new offices, existing offices, not new offices. So for example, you want to put up some caution tape or cones or ladders, because office workers aren't used to those ladders being there. And they're going to be walking around carrying whatever latest accounting report and so involved report. They don't see that 6-foot ladder or the cones or the caution tape and walk right into the ladder. Boom. If you're on that ladder, you're getting injured, right? If you're not on that ladder, they're getting injured. So let's talk about inspecting. So you really need to inspect your ladders periodically. I would almost say daily. So one of the first things you want to do is you want to check to make sure that the anti-skid feet are still there. They're not missing. And make sure that they're secure. They're not torn. One of the biggest problems with storing ladders on top of a work truck, especially in the winter, it freezes and those things crack and fall off. And now you got an unstable ladder. You also want to check and look for bends, cracks, and dents on the side rails, right? Make sure that's not damaged. And always be leery if you find a ladder that's got a lot of paint on it. Because a lot of times what happens on new construction sites is companies will paint the entire side of their ladders and then paint the company's name on, so that way somebody can't steal their ladder, because everybody's ladder looks alike. Well, paint can hide cracks, and that could be a huge safety problem. If you're working with extension ladders, check your lanyard, the rope, make sure it's not fraying, make sure that the pulley is not jammed, make sure all the lockout devices function correctly and lock out all the way. Because the lockout, when they lock on a thing that's got the little tab, make sure that locks as well. That way it doesn't open up on you while you're walking up. And then you want to verify the label on the side. That's where you're going to find the weight and the working height and all that other stuff. Those labels have been brought about through many, many lawsuits. And if you happen to find, if you inspect the ladder, give me a second. If you inspect the ladder and you find that it fails any one of these points that I just pointed out, remove that ladder from service. Now, when I say remove that ladder from service, I don't mean just take it out of the warehouse. I don't mean just take it off the truck. I mean take it to the office, take a circular saw, cut it in half. That way, nobody can accidentally grab that ladder thinking, oh, well, it was in the warehouse. I don't know why it was stored over there away from all the other ladders. But you know what? It's the only 6-foot ladder we have. Well, it was put over there because it had cracks or the rail was bent. Take it out of service and destroy it. So that way, nobody can accidentally grab it by accident. So let's talk about some tips for proper use. One, you want to maintain 3 points of contact at all times. Remember I said that one statistic that, what was it, 50% or 75% of most people fall while carrying something? Maintain 3 points of contact. So if you got both feet on the ladder, you better have a hand on the ladder. If you're lifting a foot to go to the next step, you better have 2 hands on the ladder. Always maintain 3 points of contact. Never modify or use a ladder that's missing its parts. I used to see this a lot. A lot of drywallers would take their battery operated drill and the holster, and then they would screw the holster to the rail so that way they can just put it in the holster. Well, you just put a hole through the side rail on your ladder. That's going to weaken the structural integrity. Never allow more than one person to use it at a time. I told you about the video that I just saw on LinkedIn not too long ago, right? But there are some ladders that are rated otherwise. When I was in the fire department, we had some extension ladders that were designed to carry up to 3 firefighters in full running gear. Of course, they were also extremely heavy. That's why it took 2 firefighters to transport it from the ladder truck to the site. Never stand on the top 2 rungs of a ladder because that makes it very unstable. And never leave tools or supplies on top of a ladder. My brother's going to kill me, but I'm going to do this anyway. My brother's also in communications. But before he's in communications, he also used to work for my brother-in-law as a roofer. So I got him into communications because, roofing, while it's a great job, you're out in the sun all day long. Communications, you're inside air-conditioned buildings. So when he first came into the communications industry, he didn't have a lot of money to buy tools, but he had some tools that he used to use for roofing. So he used to use this thing called a roofing hammer. Well, people don't know what a roofing hammer is. It looks like a regular hammer on one side, but the other side, instead of having a claw, it actually has a hatchet. So that way, if you're doing cedar shake roof, you can use the hatchet to split the cedar shake into multiple pieces. So instead of going out buying the correct tools, he was using his roofing hammer. You probably know where I'm going with this already. So he was climbing up and down ladders, doing work, and he left his roofing hammer on top of his ladder. And then he went to his ladder without taking that hammer off the top. What do you think happened? It fell down and hit him in the head. Right? Maybe that explains why he's not right to this day. Maybe. Never use the back rungs of a ladder to climb, to ascend or descend a ladder. And again, I've seen this happen a lot of times. I would see a guy working on a ladder, and then maybe a peer or a co-worker would walk up to him, and they would stand on that bottom rung or whatever, so they could be a little bit closer and have that talk with him. Those rungs on the backside are not designed as load-bearing. They're there for support to keep the ladder straight. Don't ever drop or throw anything from a ladder, and never walk the ladder. Walking the ladder is a thing that some people will do. They'll be standing on the ladder. Instead of climbing down the ladder, picking up the ladder, moving to the next spot and set it, they will literally rock the ladder back and forth. And as they do that, it kind of walks forward a little bit. That stresses all of the joints on the ladder. So never walk the ladder. Always make sure you follow the belt buckle rule. The belt buckle rule is pretty simple. The belt buckle rule means that your belt buckle, and if you're not wearing a belt because you're that kind of person, you can say the belly button rule. Your belt buckle or your belly button should stay within the rails of the ladder. If you go past that, You are not stable now. So keep within that. And never fasten two ladders together to get more height. I saw a video about that on LinkedIn as well. It was over in the UK, and you wouldn't believe the conversation that was happening in the chat box on that. There was people saying it was okay. No, it's not okay. And again, I love my job, but my job is not worth my life. Another area comes into transporting. So when you're transporting cables or transporting ladders, again, if it's that real heavy extension ladder, that the one is designed to hold 375 pounds, you might need two people. I mentioned earlier that technicians love to strap their ladders to the roof of their vans and their trucks. If you do that, you should make sure that you're using a ladder rack that's designed to hold ladders. I've seen them attached to roof racks with tie wraps, load straps, pull string. Those are all not acceptable. And the thing with, pull string, they could come loose and fall off the truck and then cause a car accident. The load straps, the problem with those things are designed to hold up to 1,000 pounds. And when you bring that thing down and you ratchet it down, you could damage the fiber. Don't over tighten it, the ladder. If you're storing the ladder inside of your truck, don't stack a bunch of stuff on it. I mean, I've seen technicians a lot of times, they would just throw everything in the back of their van. Well, if you put your ladders in first, then you throw a bunch of boxes of cable, you could bend the ladder. My dad always said, and I'm pretty sure your dad probably told you this too, because this sounds like something dads would say: take care of your tools, and your tools will take care of you. You'll come home safe every day. He's a smart man. So extension ladders. Again, there's the two ladders that are joined together, and you extend them to get to reaching surfaces. In that middle, you always make sure that there's 3 rungs overlapping. And the top of the ladder, whatever surfaces you're trying to get it to, make sure you're 3 rungs above that. And you may also want to secure it as well. Then you also want to follow what's called the quarter rule. The quarter rule means for every 4 feet of height that you're trying to go up, the foot of the ladder has to be 1 foot out from the base. That's why it's called the quarter rule. So, for example, if you had to get up to a 10-foot working surface, then the base of your ladder had to be 2.5 feet out, because 1/4 of 10 feet is 2.5 feet. If you're not good with math, you don't even have to do math. You can follow the fire department rule. We were trained this in the fire department, because in the fire department, your adrenaline's rushing and you're gung-ho and you want to get there immediately. And you don't necessarily stop and think, okay, well, that's a 20-foot building, so I got to be up 5 feet. Hey, Joe, bring me the tape measure. It doesn't happen that way on a fire ground. So the simple method is once you set up the ladder, stand on the very bottom rung, reach your hands out and grab the rung that are right in front of your chest. If it's set up correctly, your arms will be slightly bent. If they're slightly bent, you're within the parameters. Don't have to do any math. Makes it nice and easy. So there are some other factors that you also make sure you pay attention to. And I'm already running past my 30-minute mark here. Make sure you wear proper footwear. Make sure that it has slip-resistant soles. And I'll tell you another one. Make sure that whatever shoes you're wearing have really thick and durable soles. Because if you spend a lot of time on a ladder, pulling cable, painting, drywall, you spend the majority of your day, 6-8 hours on a ladder, and you don't have proper footwear, your feet are going to be hurting you. You can actually do some damage. And then last thing, and a lot of people don't think about this, you got to think about your health. How much do you weigh? When I used to work for a large nationwide communications contractor doing a project in Ohio, they sent me out 2 technicians. They were called the Twins. The Twins showed up on the job site. They drove from DC all the way to Ohio. And they get there, and I put them with a cable pulling crew. Now, each one of these guys probably weighed 450 pounds. And the funny thing was, I didn't think at the time about the weight capacity of the ladder. But when we told them you had to go pull cable, both of them said, we don't like heights. Yeah. So you got to consider that weight. You also have to consider your cardio health, especially if you're going to be climbing up and down a ladder all day long, right? That will give you a cardio workout. And if you've been having problems lately, you might want to avoid that kind of work. Also, if you're doing work outside, again, putting in satellite dishes or doing outside plant work, you got to worry about heat stroke, because you don't want to become unconscious while you're working on a ladder, especially working in direct sun, right? So that is our thing for tonight. The how did I get down? So somebody asked, how did I get down? So what happened was, he's talking about the story that I just talked about when I was stuck in the thing. So I literally kind of shimmied myself down. I tore up the insides of my arms when I did that. It was not fun. And then when I got finally close enough, I kind of let myself fall onto the roof of my Suburban. Didn't dent it because it was a Suburban, and then I just climbed down from there. So, yeah, it was a rather fun and interesting time. So, no questions. So that's going to end today's episode. Again, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, look up our podcast, and I'll see you next Thursday night at 6. Take care, guys, and be safe out there.